For nearly 20 years, since a 1998 hurricane, the U.S. government has allowed tens of thousands of Honduran immigrants to stay and work in the U.S. rather than forcing them to return to Honduras. The Trump administration hasn't ended that reprieve just yet, but it's hinting strongly that it's going to try. On Monday, President Trump's Department of Homeland Security announced that it was unable to come to a decision about whether to extend temporary protected status, an immigration program that allows people from a certain country living in the U.S. to remain and work here indefinitely while their home countries recover from disaster, for 57,000 Hondurans. DHS is terminating the protections for 2,500 Nicaraguans as of January 2019. The Hondurans get 6 more months of protection, assuming they re-register with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, while the Trump administration makes up its mind. But a senior administration official warned Monday that given the information available to Acting Secretary Elaine Duke, it is possible that the TPS designation for Honduras may be terminated with an appropriate delay at the end of the 6-month period. Indeed, the State Department recommended Friday that it push both Honduras and Nicaragua out of the program, along with El Salvador and Haiti. The 4 countries together account for about 300,000 people living legally in the U.S., many of them for decades. The administration will make decisions about their fates over the next few months, and it's expected to tell all of these people that they're no longer welcome. The Trump administration has already made it clear that it wants to send a message that TPS will not protect immigrants indefinitely and that it wants beneficiaries to start thinking about leaving the United States. But because so many have been in the U.S. for so long, 63% of Hondurans have been in the U.S. 20 years or more, the real likely outcome is that these TPS holders will stay in the U.S. without legal authorization. By doing so, they join the 700,000 young unauthorized immigrants who are facing the expiration of their protections under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals (DACA) program. Over its first year in office, the Trump administration has made it clear that it wants to completely overhaul the basis on which the U.S. grants legal status to immigrants. It envisions a merit-based immigration system in which individual immigrants are selected based on their high level of education and relevant professional skills, and the government has no obligation to let immigrants come to or stay in the U.S. just because their homes and families are already here. There are a lot of current U.S. immigration policies that run afoul of the Trump administration's ideas of merit. The TPS might be the biggest affront to their vision. Not only does it extend legal protections to people based almost entirely on what's happened in their home countries rather than what they can contribute as individuals, but it applies to people who were already living in the U.S. when TPS was granted, instead of allowing the U.S. to select immigrants in advance. In context, the message the Trump administration is sending immigrants through sunsetting the TPS program is the same message it's sending all other immigrants: don't get too comfortable. For the past 27 years, temporary protected status has been used as a form of humanitarian relief. The Temporary Protected Status Program was created to mend a gap in President Ronald Reagan's immigration policy. When Reagan signed the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 into law, granting legal status to hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants, there was one group that was ineligible for protection: those who entered the country without authorization in 1982 or later. While the majority of people in this group were immediately subject to deportation, nationals of certain countries were granted extended voluntary departure (EVD) status, an administrative reprieve that allowed the U.S. Attorney General to exclude certain foreign nationals from the list of those set to be deported immediately. The EVD program was controversial. There was little criteria on what made a country eligible for it, and critics of the program charged that designations were based on politically motivated factors that failed to protect nationals of countries with volatile on-the-ground conditions. That belief was solidified when Reagan rejected the Salvadoran government's request that EVD be extended to more than 400,000 Salvadoran refugees who had entered the U.S. to escape a violent civil war, a decision Reagan justified by saying that Salvadorans were already unlikely to leave the country. The TPS program, created through the Immigration Act of 1990, was supposed to resolve this issue by standardizing the process for shielding nationals of certain countries from deportation. Serving as a form of humanitarian relief, TPS is offered to nationals of countries struggling with the aftermath of war, natural disasters, or other humanitarian crises, where conditions on the ground make it difficult for people to return to safely. 10 countries: El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, are currently in the program, which is overseen by the Department of Homeland Security and is granted in 6 to 18-month intervals that can be renewed as long as DHS deems a designation necessary. To enter the program, nationals of a designated country must clear a number of conditions. They must maintain a relatively clean criminal record and pass a background check. They must pay a $495 processing fee when they first apply for the program, and every time their status is renewed, and they must reside in the United States at the time of their country's designation. This usually means that TPS beneficiaries are undocumented immigrants who were already in the U.S., those who overstayed a visa, or those who hold some other form of temporary immigration status. TPS beneficiaries are granted authorization to work in the U.S., and in some cases the ability to travel internationally, and a reprieve from deportation. But outside of that, TPS doesn't grant many other benefits. Beneficiaries do not have legal permanent resident status, and while a small number of beneficiaries may be eligible for green cards through the sponsorship of a U.S. citizen family member, the program is not intended to provide a path to citizenship. As Cecilia Minjiver, co-director of the Center for Migration Research at the University of Kansas, noted in a report on Central American TPS holders earlier this year, TPS beneficiaries are in a precarious position. While they are granted some of the benefits of residing in the U.S., their lack of full legal status prevents them from truly accessing everything. TPS is the opposite of everything the Trump administration stands for on immigration, and it's picking a fight over it. Unfortunately for the Hondurans and other TPS holders, the Trump administration no longer views humanitarian relief as a primary goal of the U.S. immigration system. It doesn't help that most of the TPS holders are exactly the opposite of the immigrants that the Trump administration imagines a merit-based system would attract. The median household income for Hondurans with TPS, for example, was $40,000, and only 38% of them had high school diplomas, according to January estimates from the Center for Migration Studies. In addition to their longtime status in the U.S., an estimated 53,000 U.S.-born kids have at least one parent who benefits from Honduras's TPS designation. The fact that these people have now largely settled here is one of the chief arguments for keeping TPS protections. Indeed, that's the logic that's led the government to renew TPS for Honduras 10 times already. But to the Trump administration, this is evidence that there's something fundamentally wrong with the TPS program, because a program called temporary shouldn't be leading people to settle permanently in the U.S. So the administration has made it abundantly clear that that's going to change and that it's going to wind down TPS protections whenever possible.